Hello, Socrates at Saddlebrooke. Today, in part 4 of What Does It Mean to Be Human, we take on the really big question. What is the meaning and purpose of life? Wow! I mean, how many times do you have the opportunity to discuss that one, even with yourself? I started my own investigation for this by asking Siri, and she directed me to Monty Python. So I looked up his movie, The Meaning of Life. It had some good pointers in it, like avoid eating fat and read a good book now and then, but I needed something deeper, something that had real substance to it. So I consulted 3 self-proclaimed authoritative sources on the subject. The first was a fascinating compilation of answers by some of the most well-known intellectuals of our day. Over a 30-year period, this was fascinating. Professor Hugh Moorhead, a philosophy professor, asked hundreds of public intellectuals, scientists, artists, authors, politicians, to comment on the question, what is the meaning or purpose of life? And he, to his amazement, got over 250 responses over that period of time. He compiled the answer into a book titled The Meaning of Life, according to the century's greatest writers and thinkers. And I'm going to go over some of those answers with you in my presentation. I think you'll find it fascinating. The second book I consulted was the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible. Now, in it, the author claims that the meaning and purpose of life, when pursued what he called under the sun, as he put it, down here on earth, only leads to dissatisfaction and emptiness in everything. All is meaningless. All is vanity, as he claims. He said the highest good in life only comes by knowing the Creator and following His ways. The third book claimed that the answer had already been discovered by artificial intelligence. This was really interesting. Doug Adams, in his immensely popular book series of the 1980s, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, claimed that with, I hope with tongue-in-cheek, that AI, supercomputer, deep thought it was called, came up with the answer already after 7.5 million years of computation. And the answer is 42. That's right, the meaning of life is 42. Now, if you think this answer is foolishness to a lot of people, you're wrong. This resonates with them. Just type in something like Adams 42 or meaning of life 42. You'll be fascinated for hours of with entertainment. I even bought the special Hitchhiker Empowerment shirt. What do you think, huh? Pretty cool, huh? He reads, "Don't panic. The answer to everything in life and the universe is 42. I sent Deep Thought a message this morning, and if he answers during my presentation, I'll let you know. Hey, am I on Wi-Fi? I'm expecting a call. I recently presented the results of my research on the topic at a Socrates forum in Saddlebrooke, Arizona, and we'll take you there now. I open my talk with a look at Professor Moorhead's compilation of answers. Welcome if you haven't been to Socrates at Saddlebrooke before, because where else can you discuss big questions of life like this? I mean, you try at Thanksgiving with Uncle Harry or whatever, and boom, right away, something's off the table, or I don't even want to go there, right? I mean, this is actually worse than politics and religion to discuss things like that. I mean, about where did I come from, where am I going? Mark Twain put it beautifully. He said there's 2 real important dates in your life, right? The first is when you're born, right? And the second is when you figure out why. So we try to figure out why here. And, the why and the answers for that is for everybody individually. I mean, I remember that movie, I think it was City Slickers, when Jack Palance had the answer to life, and he said, there's just one thing, and Billy Crystal looked at him and said, what's that? And he said, well, that's for you to figure out, right? But figuring this out is a lifelong quest. I mean, we had nothing to do with our birth. We have an expiration date on our badge here right now, something that's going to go, we're going to go home, and then when they say, what's this all about, Alfie? These are great questions. I always love the big questions, but it's the details that get you. Now, this question, Dick announced it in his email of our quest for meaning and immortality. My goodness, it's hard enough to discuss meaning, purpose and meaning, but to discuss souls and immortality and is there life after death? I got up to 60 slides, and I said, that's enough. People will start walking out and falling asleep. So I'm going to do this in 2 parts. I'm going to do our quest for meaning and purpose today and our quest for immortality the next time. So if you like this one, come back for next month. It's even going to be more fun. So we're going to discuss at that time, is our soul immortal? Will artificial intelligence save us? But today it's what is the meaning and purpose of life? So when I was doing research on this, I'm not an expert in any of these fields. I'm just a generalist, and I love it. I love to do the research. I love to make sure what I'm saying is up to date, at least it has a lot of support. Do I expect everybody to agree? Absolutely not. That's the purpose for coming here and having these kind of discussions. Professor Hugh Moreland, about 20 years ago, sent out an email to, or actually I guess it was a hand mail to 250 of the top intellectuals and thinkers in philosophy and authors and high intellectual profile people, and asked them, what's the meaning and purpose of life? Share with us. And he's put together a compendium of the answers. And most of the people responded to him. It was very, very interesting that most people would respond to him. And high-level people responded. Here's some of the answers he got back from Stephen Jay Gould. If you follow anything about evolutionary biology, one of the pinnacle of that field. He said, his answer was, we evolved from an odd group of fishes, and, quote, we may yearn for a higher answer, but none exists, okay? Bertrand Russell, one of the great philosophers of the 20th century, he called us just an accidental co-location of atoms. Other places he said, now, if you're an accidental co-location of atoms, you must build your life on a firm foundation of unyielding despair. Okay, that doesn't feel very, that's not touchy-feely, is it? What's the answer to life? Well, I don't know, but build your life on unyielding despair and you'll feel better. Carl Jung, great psychologist, psychiatrist of the 20th century, he was honest. He said, I don't know what the meaning and purpose of life is, but it looks exactly as if something were meant by it. Okay, he's being honest. I don't know, but it looks like there's some meaning there. C.S. Lewis, one of the great Christian apologists of the time and a believer in God, made, I think, a very insightful comment. He said, if the whole universe has no meaning, we should never have found it out to have no meaning. In other words, you don't know what a crooked line is unless you know what a straight line is, right? And that's what he's saying. If you don't know the opposite of it, you'd even know what the affirmative is. Tolstoy, great historian of the 20th century. After spending years searching for the answer, quote, the solution was found in religion and faith. Had to do with God. Okay, well, most people think that this question has exclusively to do with God. That's religion over here, deals with that. Science deals with facts and evidence over here, and never the twain shall meet. Well, I don't like that answer. I'd like to get as close. They should work together, in my view, so that's why we do Socrates. So many applied to Professor Moreland, said they have no idea, but if he discovered what the meaning of life was, that he should share it with them. Mark Twain, I told you. Stu Orr had this question back in his 30s, and over time you'll understand where my search went. I went on a multi-year journey at that time in philosophy and science and theology, and came up with my own resolution on it. But my presentation today will be based on some of the findings over the years that I've researched that question. So Dick talked to you about discussion questions, so be thinking about things. It's not just questions, it's discussion. I mean, it's, you comment on it. I'd love to have your comments on it. Pro, con, medium, whatever. Challenge some of these things or affirm it, whatever. What do the academics tell us? Okay, what I mean by academics, these are the people that control the intellectual agenda of our culture. They're in the universities. They're in the cultural institutions. They write the textbooks for us. They inform the media that goes on to the TV. So what do they say? Let's take a survey of what some say. One of the most respected, Steven Weinberg, if you follow anything to do with astrophysics or astronomy, renowned physicist, Nobel laureate, member of the National Academy of Sciences, Royal Society of London. These are the premier scientific organizations, and have made some great discoveries. And he said, the more discoveries I make, he says, the more the universe seems comprehensible, because he's figuring it out, the more it also seems pointless. Okay, so we get smarter, but we don't know. The universe is even more pointless than we started with. A noted evolutionary philosopher, there's been a new movement in the last 25 years called the New Atheist Movement. And Daniel Dennett's one of the top philosophers in that movement, and at Tufts University. He says, in the beginning, there were no reasons, there were no causes, nothing had a purpose, nothing so much as a function. There was no teleology in the world at all. That means no purpose or no end in sight. Peter Singer, top ethicist at Princeton University, said, we can no longer base our ethics on the idea that human beings are a special form of creation made in the image of God, singled out from all other animals and alone possessing an immortal soul. Well, Francis Crick, I read this one before in one of our previous forums. We've had over a dozen of these forums already, so some of these slides are from previous forums. And he was the co-discoverer of DNA, one of the greatest discoveries of the 20th century, and then went on to be a neuroscientist. And he really specialized in trying to find the meaning of life and purpose of life from studying the brain, studying neurosciences, and wrote a book at the end of that venture, and he said, you, talking to me, and you, said you, your joys, your sorrows, your memories, your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. Okay? Really. I grew up in this era with existentialism. That was one of the first philosophies that I try to embrace. Maybe many of you embrace that too. And the existentialists certainly raised very interesting questions. And what it really basically came down is you are in charge. You are the person. It's up to you to give life meaning. So, that's, all right, so it's up to me. I tried to give my life meaning, and I'll tell you my story sometime, and did a pretty good job of it. But at the end there, I got to, what's it all about, Alfie? I mean, how do I keep on getting more meaning to this thing called life? But isn't that our problem, that we can't do this on our own? Isn't that our problem? I mean, it's like, all right, I want to jump 3 feet. How do I jump if I'm pulling myself up by my bootstraps? Will I ever get there? Will I ever get there? It's interesting, at the end of his life, he had a real change of heart, which we can discuss sometime. It hadn't been highly publicized. Bertrand Russell was very honest about that question. As an atheist philosopher and so forth, he said, you know what, unless you assume a God, he's not saying the Christian God or the Jewish God or the Islamic God or whatever, he said, unless you assume a God, the question of life's purpose is a meaningless question. Now, I think that's a good observation, but I'd also say on the other side, a secularist assumes no God. So that's a philosophy of life, just like assuming a God is a philosophy of life. So isn't that as meaningless as well? So there's no proof for God or proof for not God, right? So we're back at a standstill on this one. Instead, what he did, and what a lot of people do, is instead of religion, if they don't like religion or they don't like the religious answers, then they move into the scientific answers. So that's where he ended up. So science, now, practice today is a philosophy based on a philosophy called materialism. If you've been to any of my
lectures before, you know, materialism is, here's the universe, that's all there is. Anything in the universe, that's all there is. If you ever seen Carl Sagan talk about the universe, the cosmos is all there is, all there ever was, all there ever will be. And the general conclusion then is, so there's no meaning and purpose to life other than what I make out of it. We are just accidents of nature. That's the message that we get from academia. So is there any doubt why people struggle to find meaning and purpose in their own life? Especially after all this COVID stuff and people just feeling out of control and fearful and so forth. We struggle with this question. Carl Sagan has, in fact, his popular program is still on after 30 years. It's in its 3rd edition now. And renowned astrophysicist, he put it like this. He said, who are we? We find that we live on an insignificant planet of a humdrum star lost in a galaxy tucked away in some forgotten corner of the universe in which there are far more galaxies than people. So, we are evidence-based. So we just don't talk about opinions. We talk about conclusions, but when we talk about a conclusion, first thing we'll ask is, well, why do you believe that? So you can have a conclusion here, but why do you believe it? It's not just because it's an opinion. And we get evidence from science. That's one way of collecting evidence. Philosophy, that's another way of collecting evidence. Theology. Some people in each one of these professions say, that's all there is. Science is the only answer. Theology. Theology is the only answer. Philosophy is the only answer. No, all of them are marvelous tools, and science is a marvelous tool. I was trained in science. I love science, so when I came to a faith in what I believe, anyway, those two things had to hold together. I had to have evidence for that. But science must be practiced in an unbiased manner. I mean, science is neutral. You can use science, you can use atomic energy to run a power plant. You can use atomic energy to blow up and kill millions of people. It's neutral. It's how it's used. And it must be practiced that way too, as a neutral tool. It just doesn't have a truth by itself. It's a truth seeker, but so is philosophy and theology. Answers to big questions can be discovered, is what my thesis is, but it requires thinking outside the box, thinking deeply. It's just not the box of, here's what I want to study, and I know all the answers in this box. It's thinking in a much broader sense, and that's what we're going to be doing today. This kind of philosophy of knowledge goes back to Socrates' best students, Plato and Aristotle. Aristotle was the best one for writing things down. Socrates just answered questions, asked questions, and trained people. He trained Plato, and Plato trained Aristotle, and Aristotle wrote a lot of this down. And he categorized knowledge into 2 main categories. Physics, that's what they called it in those days, what they called science in those days. Today, it's only been 200 years or so that we've even used the term science. But physics is the physical world of material things in space and time. Metaphysics is things outside that physical world. It's the immaterial things that's outside the physical world. And they are foundational to understanding the physical world. We can't even do science unless we have a foundation understanding of knowledge. What is knowledge? How do we acquire knowledge? What is logic? How do we write down equations here and then send the man to the moon out there? That's incredible. This is a metaphysical, this is immaterial things that we do that result in physical things. He also said in his metaphysics treatments, he said that our innate desire is for knowledge. That's why you're here. That's why you go to the clubs. That's why you go. I don't know if you went to the Chicago concert last night. That was great. I'm not sure you went for knowledge. But a lot of things that we do is constantly for knowledge. We are curious people. What drives us? How do we know? How do we know that we're made to find out things and to discover things? Because we have this need. You ever have an itch that you can't itch? I mean, but when you itch it, then you know that you had a need to itch. It's the same thing with knowledge. We must satisfy this need. That's why we all showed up today. We are driven as people to know why. And the great philosophers that came, Plato and Aristotle, had a definition of how you know something. They had 4 definitions. They said, we know it by its design, we know it by its purpose, we know by what it is, they tap it, it's physical, and we know how it operates. Those 4 things. We've gotten away from that kind of material and immaterial knowledge but we've talked about that many times in the past. Let's first examine physical life before we get into this immaterial, what this immaterial world is. Let's look at the physical life at our most fundamental level. And too bad my fun guy, my Loxodon magnus, is a one-celled creature. I hope at least the video works, even if it doesn't have the sound. Just imagine the Bee Gees there, staying alive. Right. Staying alive, staying alive. What's he doing? That's a one-cell creature. One cell. Now, what's he doing? He's called a ciliate. Why is he called a ciliate? Because on his outside he has these hairs, and that propels him. Why does he want to be propelled? Because he wants to move. Why does he want to move? He wants to eat. Why does he want to eat? Because he wants to stay alive. He's driven to stay alive. And when he reaches the point where he can no longer stay alive, you'll see something coming out of his back here in a second. Just watch for it. He's starting to leak. Poor guy. There he goes. You see that? He's leaking. He's losing his internal control system, his inability to stay alive. He doesn't know it yet. I'm not sure what he knows. He's driven to do what he does. But he's striving to stay alive. Here he is a little bit later. Here he is. Death occurs. He can no longer stay alive when he loses his ability to stay alive. What's his ability to stay alive? The internal control system that drives him to do this. Well, do we know anything about that internal control system? Yeah, we know a lot about it. We've used science a lot physiology to understand what that is. I'm going to show that in a minute. He maintains this internal control system, and when it ceases to do its job, it reaches equilibrium with the outside. What does that mean? Well, think about this room here. This is maintaining equilibrium from the 30 degrees outside, right? Because it has a control system. There's a temperature. I can set the temperature and so forth, and there's a sensor. It needs to turn on the heat. Comes in, there's control system, there's fans, there's mechanical things that are in here to turn on that heat. When we no longer have that internal control system, what happens? This goes cold, it reaches the same temperature as the outside, and we're cold. So when his control system goes out, he's dead. He's dead. Here he is, just about ready. I fell in love with this guy by putting this little video together, and never thought I'd fall in love with a one-celled creature, but that kind of happens because you see him dissolve there and you go, oh, ashes to ashes, right? Dust to dust. I almost felt like giving him a funeral. But there he is, he's reached equilibrium. We're all in a position to reach equilibrium, aren't we? I mean, this is not, we're not here forever. We're not anticipating to be here forever. Our control systems are wearing down. Here's a pictorial of what's going on here. Life, and look at, is inside this membrane. If that membrane wasn't around it, that internal environment would be the same thing as the external environment. Death, equilibrium, right? But as long as he's inside and he has his control system inside the membrane, and he has this internal environment that he can control within certain limits, he can be alive. Where did those systems come from? They're built in. They're built in from the very beginning. There's no answer to where that comes from, where that built-in system. So that built-in system, what Aristotle would tell us, that's designed. That system has to be designed. It just didn't happen on its own. And why is it designed? For a purpose. Because we see the word to. He's building a control system to survive and to reproduce. That's called, what we've said in previous talks, teleology. Teleology. Here's teleology in action. How could we forget that Apollo 13? Wasn't that just an amazing event? I mean, I remember being right there at the TV, and I can't believe that those, first of all, that they had the guts to go up and do that kind of thing. And second of all, they were just so calm and cool. They knew something was wrong, and they had this desire to do the right thing. But what happened? It was just a little oxygen thing went out and exploded and did it. So something went wrong with their control system. And within minutes, they would reach equilibrium with the outside. Poof, they're done. This control system was designed for a purpose. I don't think anybody would argue that that wasn't designed for a purpose. Well, human beings are designed for a purpose. They have 100 trillion of these individual cells, 200 different types of these cells designed for a purpose. How do I know that? Because physiology shows us that it's that way. We talked about that 2 or 3 sessions ago. It's called homeostasis. It's striving to stay alive. We have to stay within those measurements. And every one of our subsystems within our body has certain external conditions that it's protecting us from. And the blood has a pH that has to be. You go to the doctor, they check your oxygen, that has to stay within a certain range. They check your temperature, that has to stay within a certain range. They check your blood pressure, that has to stay. There's 20, 30, 40 of these kind of indications that have to stay within a certain range. And our systems inside, called homeostasis, are the control systems that keep us within the limits. So we have sensors, there's set points that have the range that has to be, there's a membrane. My skin is an organ, right? It protects me from the outside. Once I no longer have that, I'm no longer alive. And the control systems have to be built in, designed. So how can we know something's designed? I use this term design. All right, how do we know that something is designed? Well, we can scientifically detect design. Let's use our scientific knowledge to detect design. You look at something, is that designed? I don't know. Well, let's use scientific knowledge to do it. First thing, let's just imagine if the Apollo 13 space capsule was built without a design. I mean, nobody would think that that's the case. Where's the blueprint for it? Where's the assembly instructions for it? It's an engineered system. We know that. Well, what does that mean in science terms? Well, it means there's high information content. Imagine all the information in those manuals and those assembly instructions on what to do with the parts. Just knowing about the parts doesn't do anything for us. They would just remain parts if there wasn't a blueprint, assembly instructions, if this wasn't engineered and put together. We had a session 3 or 4 times ago about the cell, what goes on. And by the way, all these, if you don't know this already, all these talks are on video cast on the website. So you can go back and review them and review them again. Some people just keep on reviewing them. That's wonderful. These subsystems, highly specified information, and there's an extremely, ridiculously low, I should put, probability that this would occur on its own. I mean, it would be like, we used one of the examples before of writing Shakespeare, finding a Shakespeare, let's say Hamlet, and saying, oh, that just happened because somebody took a bunch of Scrabble letters over a long period of time and just threw them out there. No, that's not going to happen. That's not really. But we can use science to set limits and say, you know, on a probability basis, that's extremely low. Information content is extremely high. And when that information is highly specified, like what we find in these control systems in life, we say, that's designed. That's how we determine what design is. Each of these subsystems that we're talking about are, I called, irreducibly complex. What does that mean? Well, it's Apollo 13. It wasn't the whole capsule that started failing, it was just one small part of it. And that one small part of it was designed, and there was a failure, just like we had a failure today with our sound system. When it fails, one small thing means it's irreducibly complex. You can't take away this sound card and have it work. You can't. In fact, sometimes you can't even take away a millimeter off something without it working. You can't do something if it's not working perfectly. There's telltale signs of an intelligent agent. We see telltale signs. Then we can conclude that this is intelligently designed, and there's no evolutionary mechanism to explain it. We showed the cell. That incredible picture on the right is actually a single cell, inside a single cell. All those are little organelles that are actually doing something to do and control its environment in its particular place. But evolutionary biology says that the engineering of that cell is an illusion. Really? That nature cobbled the cell together on her own over time. Really? I mean, the evidence just screams at us that this cell is designed. All right, so that's design, but how do we know something has a purpose? That's where teleology comes in. Well, when we observe something that is striving for a goal, to achieve that goal, we think, I don't have to know all the details of how it works on a cause and effect basis, that this caused that caused that. I can see the whole system striving toward a goal. We can ascertain with a high probability that it has intention to achieve that goal. All right? We don't necessarily know all the details, but we have sufficient information to make, in science we call it the inference to the best explanation. It's not a total conclusion like logic, like 2 + 2 = 4, but we say high probability, that's the answer. But it's based on the evidence that we have. If the evidence changes, we can reevaluate whether or not our inference is a good inference or not. But we can make a conclusion. We just don't stay and, got to wait to know how A affects B, affects C, and so forth. We can conclude that that system, whatever we're watching, whatever it is, we're going to watch Dick here play golf, and we're going to watch Brent shoot his arrow. They're both sportsmen. I don't need to know all the details of Dick's swing. I don't, and I don't want to. He doesn't know all the details of his swing, but he's striving for a purpose. What's his purpose? To get that ball in the hole. How do I know that? Well, I watch him. If I knew nothing about it, I'd watch him tee off. Then I'd watch him stroke again. Then again. And again. And again. Then again. But he eventually gets there, right? He put the ball in the hole. Next time I observe him, he does the same thing. High probability I know that he's striving for a goal. He has an end in mind, what he's doing. Brent shoots arrows at targets. This lady here is shooting an arrow into the air. How do I know what she's just shooting it in the air randomly, or is she trying to do something? Well, I follow her arrows. I go and I see, well, after a while, all those arrows seem to be landing around this thing called a target. And then after the target, I see she keeps on refining, and she gets to the bullseye. She's striving to achieve an end there. That's teleology. We can arrive at that conclusion of purpose just by observation of what the striving is, what end they're trying to achieve. But as you know, I use Dr. Dawkins as my shill here all the time because he says it so well. I mean, he's out there all the time. He says the essence of life is statistical improbability on a colossal scale. Well, I would totally agree with that. But I would define colossal, not colossal. I would define it as another word for impossible or blind faith. That's fine. Some of us have faith in things we don't have enough evidence for. To me, a statement like that is blind faith. Which is funny because he's one of the leaders in the New Atheist movement, and he says that religionists all are people of blind faith. They don't at least at Socrates here, we're going to say, here's what the evidence is, here's what we believe and why. Don't challenge him either. Because if you challenge him, you'll be bullied. He's very articulate and much more than I am. I'd be bullied over with his bluster. He would say something like this: you cannot be both sane and well educated and disbelieve in evolution. The evidence is so strong that any sane, educated person has got to believe in evolution. Okay? Now, I know my little Magnus creature doesn't know it has been designed for a purpose. Pretty sure. He's never written me any letters. He's never published any books. He's never given me an internet email or anything. But I'm not going to talk about what he knows and doesn't know. I am going to talk about human beings, what we know and don't know. How do we know human beings have been designed for a purpose? That's an interesting question. Well, we've talked about this 2 sessions ago, 3 sessions ago, twice we talked about how we have a dual nature. We have a dual nature, a physical nature, a body, and we have a spiritual nature. After we were done last time, the first time we talked about this, Dick asked for a show of hands. How many of you think you have a spiritual nature in addition to your physical nature? But almost every hand, I think, went up at that time. And we sense this. I mean, we know that we have both a body and something's going on in our mind. We know we call it what's going on in our mind something subjective, but we know that the world out there is objective. 2 things going on. What we see, look at me looking at the thinker statue there. What I can see with my eye, that's good, that's sensory perception coming in, but I can turn away from it and I can be thinking about that object 10 years ago, still thinking about it. I remember the day, I remember what I did that day in San Francisco. And I have 2 things going on simultaneously in this dual nature. I have a brain. Last time we talked about, believe it or not, we talked about quantum mechanics. Wow, sounds pretty heavy, but quantum mechanics is the most fundamental knowledge of reality checking and hypothesis that we have today. And we talked about how we can have 2 things happening at different places in the universe called quantum entanglement. This knows what this is doing. This knows what this is doing. How do we explain that? We don't know. We have no idea. But we know if this is pointed up, this can't be pointed down. This has to be up too. So as we discover what this is, we discover what that is. And there's no communication between the 2 points. So that's how I understand one possible scientific explanation for how the mind can be different than the brain. I'm going to define the mind as non-local, something outside of us that's immaterial. The brain is just an organ. The brain is an organ that senses, it processes information, but so do my kidneys and my heart and so forth. It's not more than that. And yet a lot of neuroscience, materialistic neuroscience today, says that everything happens in the brain. What you think about what I'm talking about is just an illusion. It's not really happening, okay? You're welcome to believe that. I believe that there's a mind that's outside, that's non-local, and I can't explain much more than it's non-local, but it's not the brain. Mind is not the brain. And these 2 work together simultaneously. My dual nature works together simultaneously to produce my thoughts and my actions, my feelings, and it's integrated, maybe integrated by something like quantum mechanics. So we are both a body and a soul. Our core, but at our core, we're spiritual beings. We're a soul at our very core. And why do I believe that? Because everything that I am is in my mind here, my meaning, my purpose. It's not a physical thing. That's not physical, right? My sense of right and wrong, my sense of justice, my moral obligations and duties, my values. Everything I do is based on my values, my hope for the future. I have a transcendent sense. That's who we really are. I don't consider that an illusion. I say all my core beliefs are mental states, mind states, not physical states. My heart and my soul, my mind and my intellect, my love and compassion, my emotions, my feelings, my spiritual and religious sense, my creativity, my artistic expression. And I have free will to choose what I want to do. Here I am. Do I go that path? Do I go that path? Do I go, not go, and so forth? I'm not determined. If you're a determinist, if everything's predetermined by all the molecules that are in motion, I don't have any choice. So what do I do? I think we all believe we have a choice, or most of us believe we have a choice. We pick among the mental states, the choices that we have to go that direction, that direction, that direction. We make decisions that determine our actions. Otherwise, we'd be a marionette, we'd be a puppet. We'd be determined by the molecules. And that's what the evolutionary sciences tell us, that we're determined by our molecules. I'm that guy on the right there. I'm breaking free of being controlled by the molecules in motion. Stephen Hawking, I think we all probably know who he is, recently passed and so forth. He was an astrophysicist, evolutionist, and an atheist, but he was very honest when he said this quote. He said, I have noticed even people who claim everything is predestined and that we can do nothing to change it, they all look before they cross the street. So what's the physical senses that happens? What happens in our mind? Well, our mind is an organ that processes our sensory information. We have 5 senses. Sight, sound, smell, mouth, touch. Those senses come in, and the mind processes that information. That's extremely important. That's what connects our physical being to our mental state. I like the way Christian philosopher J.P. Moreland puts it. He says, about his dual nature, he says, I am a soul, I have a body. I am a soul, I have a body. So the body is how we express our soulish inclinations. Agnostic, and this isn't just because he's a religious guy, all right? Agnostic neurosciences, Jeff Schwartz out of UCLA puts it this way: the brain, to be sure, is indeed the physical embodiment of the mind. That's the organ through which the mind finds expression and through which it acts in the world. So he sees the dual nature. In fact, he does some amazing work with obsessive compulsion, excessive compulsive behavior with people, and actually not only changing their behavior. You've heard of mind over matter. You've heard of placebo effect. We go to a doctor and the doctor says, I'm going to give you a pill, and it's really a jelly bean, right? and it does, but we think we're getting well. We have mind over matter. That works very, very well. Anyway, my conclusion, and you can disagree, humans are more than the sum of our atoms. Humans are more than evolved animals. Mr. Darwin, before Mr. Darwin wrote Origin of the Species in 1859, this was this common way science did its business, to understand the two worlds of physics and metaphysics. He set out on purpose to take metaphysics out of science, take the immaterial out of science, and that was his goal. It was actually a religious goal. The theory of natural selection he gave us, which is the basis for evolution today, he said the theory of natural selection provides a mechanism by which such transformation could be produced. Nature has no ends in mind. So in one fell swoop, he killed teleology, and he killed metaphysics with that. But he's not succeeding. We've talked about this so much. I mean, in fact, if anything, all the top biologists realize that there's something drastically wrong with the theory, but it's so entrenched in our culture and in science and our culture. It needs a major paradigm shift, and that's going to have to take a long period of time to make that transition. But what he did succeed at the time, and it was like this, within a period of 10, 20 years, he succeeded in replacing God, whatever God we're talking about, something outside the system, something metaphysical here. He has succeeded in replacing God in science and culture with the term evolution. So whenever you see metaphysical conclusions and so forth, evolution did this, evolution did that. Before 1859 it was God did this, God did that. Design and purpose, however, with the new science is back on the table. And how is that going to affect our quest for meaning and purpose? Will we go back? That's why the title of this whole series has Science Rediscovered a Creator? We're evaluating evidence, both sides. Yes, I would say it's going to radically affect our quest for meaning, radically. Because in a single stroke back in 1859, Darwin's theory changed how people thought about meaning and purpose in life, how they thought about cause and effect, how they thought about natural law, how it eliminated the need for metaphysics, how it changed the fundamental answers to the big questions of being and knowledge and virtue and justice. And it even caused a whole reevaluation of Western philosophy that was in place for 2,000 years. So what has been the impact of this growing falsification of Darwin's theory? Well, in the three big areas here. In science, there's an undercover shift now to something called systems biology. Systems biology. Biologists realize what's going on, but they know that engineering is not an illusion, that design and purpose is not an illusion, that it's really helpful for them to have an idea when they do their studies and their research that there's a purpose to what the thing is that they're evaluating, and that there's probably a design to it. And there's information content, information technology that didn't exist in Mr. Darwin's day. They're incorporating the new technologies. In philosophy, there's a return to the necessity of metaphysics as a foundation for knowledge and for the argument for God's existence. And in theology, it's a return to natural theology. Before Darwin's time, people would look up with awe and wonder at the creation and go, wow, look at that. It's amazing. Look what the Creator did. Look what the Creator did. That dissipated. That kind of talk dissipated in theology in the last 150 years. There's a rebirth of natural theology. So, as Dick mentioned, our series here has Science Rediscovered a Creator. We're accumulating this evidence, and this is number 6 out of the 7. Number 7, who or what is this God that we're talking about? We're going to actually put evidence on the table for various views of that. I use the term metaphysics. I really should go and do a little philosophy side study here on what is it and why is it ignored by materialism. Well, meta just simply means beyond. So if this is all there is because that's the world and the cosmos has been defined, what's on the other side? Nothing. Usually it's well, don't ask me that question. It's a meaningless question. It's not a meaningless question. The only reason you can even look inside is because there's metaphysical foundational principles that allow you to look inside and to have the logic to come to conclusions. So today's science, the way it's practiced, rejects the existence of anything beyond the material universe, rejects the immaterial explanations. Materialism, matter is all there is an ideology. It is not science. It's not neutral science. It's an ideology. And it became foundational with Darwin. Metaphysics is considered, here's one of the reasons that metaphysics isn't considered in science, is because it's messy, right? You can't take what's immaterial and put it on the table and do hardcore evaluations. You can't get a grant to not to use the electron microscope. This is a philosophical discussion at some level. It's messy. I can't get to 2 + 2 = 4 with metaphysics. It has philosophical content, but life is messy. Life is messy. I mean, if we want to talk about everything being inside the box, that's physics. If we want to talk what's outside the box is metaphysics. So physics is matter, space, time, natural law, anything temporal that's going on. But metaphysics is this immaterial world that's outside the box. Philosophy, logic, immaterial world, design, purpose, and consciousness. Now, if you take those away, then all you have is materialism to study. But life is messy, so shouldn't science explain messy things too? I mean, science cannot be practiced without metaphysical foundation. We can't just ignore it. We have to have science to think metaphysically again. Need a productive methodology that encourages both of those to work together. Expand our box of knowledge. Here's an illustration that I always found fascinating that would allowed me to say, yes, that's it. I had one of those aha moments when I played this little puzzle one time. Take the box and put these 9 dots on it and say, okay, let's connect all those 9 dots with 4 straight lines. Well, that sounds pretty easy. But you can't lift your pencil. Oh, well, I should be able to do that. There's 4 lines right there. I'm only missing the middle dot. I should be able to do that. Well, first one, that doesn't do it. I'm missing the middle dot. The second one, let's get the middle dot. But, geez, that's 5 lines. That's no good. Can't do that. Let's start all over and ponder. I mean, let's think outside the box a little bit here. Let's start and get the middle dot, get one of the sides, and then say, what can I do here? What can I do here? I can't just stay in the box, because if I stay in the box, I either draw 5 lines or I miss a dot. But if I ponder a little bit and go outside the box with the second line, have one of those aha moments. Aha. You start seeing it yourself, what the aha moment is? I get a no, but look at that. There's line 3. Whoa. Open system thinking outside the box. All I have to do is connect with number 4 across the top. I did it. I solved the puzzle. But I had to go outside the box to do it. Open systems thinking, this kind of outside thinking in science, is being kept off the table despite the evidence. What do I mean by open system sciences? Well, the new sciences. Science of intelligent design. Physiology, which we talked about with vitalism. That's what our little Magnus creature was doing, staying alive with teleology. The science of consciousness. You know, the University of Arizona here, every 2 years, hosts the worldwide conference on the science of consciousness. I want to attend that. I think I just missed it last year. That would be really cool. Holistic medicine. We find out, you know, the body heals itself. It's just not getting another prescription. It's not getting another operation or whatever. The body can heal itself. And it does. And there's doctors, and we choose our doctors, if they believe this, that want to encourage the body to heal itself. Quantum biology, my goodness, that's a thought. I mean, quantum entanglement, our mind and our brain are 2 different things. Let's think like that. I mean, let's think there's a possibility that science can be used in that way. Neuroscience, I put down RSMA. What is that? Those are religious, spiritual, metaphysical experiences. We've talked about these about two forums ago, that these are real experiences. We just can't ignore them. Just because we can't put and test them with a particular device, we can take testimony. I can tell you, and you can put me in a lab and see if I can have some experiences that actually meet reality. I can get evidence that way. But here's what happens with new sciences, and in any field. I'm not just picking on science, but any field, when a paradigm has been set in motion, when everybody gets educated the same way, we have consensus science. I mean, we see it today in the debates, the political debates. You get, here's what I believe, and that's it, and I'm not going to be thinking outside the box at all. So a new science comes along, a new paradigm comes along, and the first reaction is to ignore it altogether. You never saw that in the pharmaceutical industry, right? but first reaction is, well, just ignore it. They'll all go away. Fortunately, I'm not important enough to even be considered to go away, but that's what happens. Next, all of a sudden, there's a lot of evidence for this, and and other people are talking about it, and there's a lot of buzz about it. Well, we can't allow that buzz to change things. So this is ridiculed then as neuroscience. And eventually, when all the data is in and these things are proven to be facts, everybody gets on board, right? So we've been going that way, now we're all going that way. That's what I'd like to do in this class, right? We go this way, if that's where you want to go, but there's also other alternative this way too. And eventually then I knew that all along. That's obvious. Throughout history, consensus science has really stultified scientific breakthrough. Scientific breakthrough usually comes with one dude back in the corner coming up with an idea, and eventually that idea wins out. Can you imagine if we did and had better and faster solutions by starting outside the box? Why don't we start out, look at 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we are, we connected all the dots. Materialism stays inside the box, continually, leading to dead end after dead end after dead end after dead end. Life designed for a purpose. Materialism says no, but unbiased science says yes. And when we look at life at the most fundamental level, we discover design and purpose all over the map. That life strives for a goal with intention to stay alive, to reproduce, and to find meaning and purpose in that life. We constantly experience this living drama all the time, and we approach it with awe and wonder, yet we deny the obvious and a lot of times just accept materialism without criticism. So, in conclusion, I want to say that materialism is an ideology, not science. Science is evidence-based, not ideologically based. And if it is ideologically based, then there's more than one hand clapping. It's not just the consensus. There's another hand opposing it. Materialism proclaims that the immaterial is a delusion. I don't think so. A fairy tale? I don't think so. A ghost in the machine? I don't think so. And it says God is a delusion. Either God is a delusion or he's irrelevant. Metaphysical solutions are kept off the table and then denounced. But the scientific evidence for design and purpose is irrefutable and can no longer be ignored.
How would you answer Professor Moorhead's question? What's your conclusion about the meaning and purpose of life? Do you think you're nothing but a bundle of nerve cells and associated molecules, as Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of the DNA molecule, has concluded? Or do you think you're something more than just a material body? Do you sense that you have an immaterial nature that animates you with feeling and emotion, love and compassion, creativity, artistic expression, perhaps even a spiritual connection to others and to God? Do you relate to Peter Singer, chair of the ethics department at Princeton University, when he lectured that we're nothing but an animal and have no special relationship to God? To Dr. Singer and most evolutionary biologists, we are not unique creation, since we have no special basis for any kind of ethical behavior. Perhaps you relate to Steven Weinberg, one of the top physicists of our time and Nobel laureate. Dr. Weinberg concluded that nothing in this universe, including us, has any meaning or purpose. As he put it, the more we know about the universe, the more the universe seems pointless. Or perhaps you follow Carl Sagan, one of the most respected astronomers of our time, and his wildly popular Cosmos series. To him, we're just insignificant. We live on an insignificant planet, in some insignificant corner of the universe without any meaning. Or Richard Dawkins, one of our leading evolutionary biologists, who tells us that we're just an accident of nature. As he put it, a statistical improbability on a colossus scale. God doesn't exist. God is just a delusion, he proclaims in his best-selling book, The God Delusion. How could all these top, highly credentialed scientists and public intellectuals possibly be wrong. Maybe they're not. They have held the most prestigious appointments at our universities. They taught our educators and children, filled our library with books, curricula, television productions. They have really set the stage for the public discourse. And it seems that their materialistic worldview is impervious to challenge, and its conclusion is held as a conclusion of science. Well, first to note, and most importantly, is this is not a conclusion of science. It's their ideology. Science doesn't conclude that at all. It's their worldview that concludes it. An atheistic worldview that assumes there's no creator, and if there was a creator, the creator's not relevant. We are born, we die, we become worm food, and a footnote to history. There's no soul to survive the grave. There's no afterlife. We're just an accident of nature, evolved from pond scum with no meaning or purpose to our lives, other than whatever meaning and purpose we give it. Well, you might be saying, Stu, obviously you're biased, painting an extreme case here. Nobody but a depressed pessimist would conclude any of those things. Well, I'm afraid that's the standard picture painted by the top academics today. 90% of the National Academy of Sciences holds to it and unrelentingly defend that worldview. But you might say, well, there are plenty of scientists who don't buy into that. In fact, who are very religious. They might even go to church. I even know some of them. Well, that's probably true. And you can be religious and be a scientist at the same time. But, and this is a very big but, you better not bring your theistic worldview into the workplace, classroom, or publish them. Don't bring a God hypothesis to the table in any professional environment, even if it's just for discussion. And note, if you don't keep mum and do your science in accordance with the politically correct rules of engagement, you'll be in jeopardy of losing your job. If you're a student, you may be marked down, even fail the class. Your assignment is to perpetuate this worldview. If you insist on not towing the line, you probably will need to take up a different profession. And please don't enroll in any of our scientific curriculum, particularly in the biological or psychological sciences. If you don't keep your theistic ideas to yourself, there will be consequences. Now, you might think I'm over dramatizing this, but if you've been following this series all along from the beginning, you know that I've documented this all along. Science has buried God, not because of evidence, but because their theistic ideas are not welcome. The Academy has buried God with its ideological bias and political hold. Now, it wasn't always like that. In fact, for the majority of time, it hasn't been like that. This is a conclusion of the modern era. Ironically, science was born back in the 17th century out of a theistic worldview. Founders of modern science, Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, Kepler, and they invented the scientific method so they could, as they put it, think God's thoughts after them. Even into the 19th century, theistic and materialistic worldviews could work side by side and do great science, despite of whatever their ideological bias was. But by the end of the 19th century, especially culminating with Darwin, the scientific academy became dominated by atheistic materialists and shut down theistic thinking. We were set on a path to materialistic theory of everything. There was no longer any need, supposedly, for God. Materialism had all the answers. And if it didn't have it now, it will have it in the future. Something totally unexpected happened. In the mid-20th century, with the advancement of experimental technology and with the developments within astronomy and molecular biology, physiology, neuroscience, and quantum mechanics, the scientific discoveries of these last 50 years in fact, have challenged this ideological hold with hard evidence that supports a creator. The purpose of this entire series has been to review that evidence and test its explanatory power against the current received knowledge. The new evidence not only gives a firm foundation for theistic science, but in many cases even provides a better explanation, sometimes the best explanation. Today, we've explored several competing theistic scientific explanations involving what it means to be human. These conclusions, based on hard scientific evidence, include human beings have intention and free will to make decisions that are not predetermined by our materiality or our environment. Living organisms have a life goal, a teleology that gives purpose to its existence, staying alive for one of them. And it appears that this teleology is built in to the organism right from the very beginning, certainly given evidence for a creator. Human beings have a dual nature, a non-material nature in existence as well as their material body. Our minds are different from our brains and something more than our brain. And the transcendental metaphysical realm is foundational for science to even operate. But this is swept under the table for ideological reasons. Discovering a creator would certainly give meaning and purpose to life, wouldn't it? If we would only break out of the materialistic box that locks us into this consensus science through assumption and through peer pressure. If we could venture outside the box into the light of open-minded science as Socrates commends us to do, free to evaluate without the assumption of materialism, then the evidence for a creator would become obvious, wouldn't it? And if we wanted to, we still could choose to trust it or not trust it in conducting our worldview. Nobody's forcing worldview upon us. We're just open to the evidence from different perspectives. Much celebrated 20th century philosopher, atheistic philosopher, Bertrand Russell, understands the situation very well when he says that unless you assume a God, the question of life's purpose is meaningless. Russell is exactly right. At the end of the day, there's only two paths to choose from for conducting your business. God exists or God doesn't exist. They're 180 degrees apart. But science can operate on either path. And see, since neither can be proven, one has to assume a direction of which way he or she thinks the evidence points. Now, deciding on a theistic path doesn't mean blind faith. No, it means to trust and verify the evidence all along the way, but with an open mind. Much celebrated Christian pastor Rick Warren understands the situation as Russell does, but from the opposite direction. He says in his best-selling book, The Purpose-Driven Life, you didn't create yourself, so there is no way you can tell yourself what you were created for. If I handed you an invention you had never seen before, you wouldn't know its purpose. And the invention itself wouldn't be able to tell you either. Only the creator of the owner's manual could reveal its purpose. You might say, well, you don't want to play this game of choosing a direction before all the information is in. Your choice is to remain skeptical and agnostic. But then the question of life's purpose remains meaningless, as Russell said, throughout your entire lifetime. Remember, Socrates commends us not to be willfully ignorant, as he put it. The unexamined life is not worth living. I faced this dilemma myself in my mid-30s and ended up, to my delight, choosing a path. It was the instruction given in Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is broken, before your spirit returns to God who gave it. Russell died in 1970 without the benefit of the scientific evidence discovered in the last 50 years. But you have seen this evidence now in this series and can evaluate it for yourself. Which path will you choose to follow? Next time, we complete what it means to be human with part 5, the human quest for immortality. Do we have an immortal soul? And if we are just material beings, why couldn't artificial intelligence save us? Until then, I challenge you to think how you would answer Professor Moorhead's request to comment on what is the meaning or purpose of life. Which direction do you think it points, the evidence? Which endgame assumption are you going to make before the game ends? I'm Stuart Orr. We hope to see you back here for part 5 as we explore the fascinating world of artificial intelligence. What is it? Will it ever exceed human intelligence? Can it be the savior of the world? See you then.